Today, we had the pleasure of meeting Jenna Black, a luxury soul business and wealth mentor and host of the Woman of Wealth podcast. Her mission is to remind others of their innate power, and she believes that unlocking your higher self activates higher wealth.
During this conversation, we talk about trusting in divine rearrangement, how to navigate the in between space when what you've been working towards hasn't manifested yet, and how to shift out of comparison into inspiration. We also discuss that the antidote to uncertainty is self love, how motherhood can enhance your business, and how money is a byproduct of following your truth. Enjoy this episode.
All right, well, Jenna, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
So, for anyone listening who isn't familiar with your work, how would you describe what you do?
Yeah, well, I love that question. I feel like it changes all the time. But I work as a business coach and wealth energetics mentor, but I also work on a very deep soul level with my clients. So I like to kind of look at the strategy, the energetics, as well as soul activation. I work with a lot of women-led businesses and a lot of visionaries, soul-led people that are creating incredible movements and missions in the world. And I really help them, get deep into who they are and what they're here to do, and then channel that into a business that serves them, that thrives. So yeah, I love to work in that holistic, multi-dimensional way because I feel like that's where we get the deepest impact and results. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. So coaching, mentoring, a little bit of healing on the side. I do a bunch of different
I
things.
love that. So how did you get into that? Like, how did that come to be? Because obviously it sounds you're working in several different sectors. It's kind of not like a mainstream path that you took. So how did that
Yeah.
come to be?
Yeah, I think I really had a huge awakening in my life when I think I was like 27 when I quit my job. I used to work in fashion, in e-commerce, branding, social media, and I was in that industry for many years and just feeling super constricted and not not in alignment, not authentic to who I was. And I knew, something's going on here underneath the surface. And I think my body and my health was suffering, and that was through some different health challenges that I had. That was really like my moment of reclaiming my life and where I want to take my life. And I actually started, which I feel so many people tend to do, but I actually started as a health coach and got certified as a health coach and just went on really for my own personal journey to know more about me and my body and what was happening for me. And then in that journey, I was almost instantly faced with, you have to quit this job and get out of this industry. And even if it feels scary, just go out there and figure out what you want to do. And I always was a freelance writer on the side. So I've been a writer for many, many years and I love to write. And so I quit, did a little bit of health coaching, a little bit of freelance writing. Like my first business was kind of, a bit of a mishmash of everything. And then through that journey, this was like 8 to 7 years ago. Through that journey, I then realized, like, where am I not actually in my power and where is my money stuff coming through? And so then I went on a big exploration around money mindset and wealth energetics and money healing. And that then kind of set the trajectory of my business more towards that realm and supporting women with their money story, with their self-worth story. And naturally through that, I kept coming back into my old work around social media marketing and e-commerce and building brand. And so I kind of just started to see this like blend of where there's a need for my clients to feel supported in their mindset, supported in their energy, but also how can we bring their gifts that they're unlocking in the process into a business that serves them and grow that business sustainably and really take it to new levels. So that was where I more, pivoted into more of the business coaching side and brand and wealth energetic side. But I think, like with all work, it kind of just evolves and changes as we go, especially when we're following soul, which has been literally my strategy the whole time, is just say yes to what is coming through for me and what's true. So yeah, I've definitely gone through different iterations and initiations and changes in myself, and that I always bring that to my work, and I always evolve and expand things from what I go through. So, in recent years, becoming a mama, I've got 2 kids. And so that has been another aspect of, now working with a lot of mums in my community and seeing like, how can we bring this into business and really support women in the whole, multifaceted approach of who we are, and getting to have all that we desire, and getting to design and follow our intuition and create a life that is fulfilling to us. So yeah, that's a little bit about my journey. There's obviously many tangents I could go on, but that's the overview.
Well, I really would love to hear your perspective on motherhood in business,
Yeah.
just because I know for so many women at this day and age is probably these 2 conflicting roles a lot of the time. So I would love to hear your mindset kind of moving into that next phase of life. But before we do, I'm super curious if you're willing to share a little bit more about your own money kind of story and struggles that brought you to this place of now helping other women and shifting your own mindset from whatever your history was or past to where you are now.
Yeah. I think that when I started doing money mindset work and looking at my own story, some of the biggest patterns and experiences that I had from childhood was really like, working hard, like physical hard labor, and then only just having enough. So it was this kind of conditioning passed down through so many generations of, this is where you're going to spend most of your time. You're probably not going to like what you do. That was another piece. Like, you have to, to receive, you have to do something that you don't really like or isn't fulfilling, isn't nourishing. And then you'll just get enough. And then it's like, my experience with my parents was like, keep, save it. It's like, don't trust in the release of money too. So that was another piece for me of like trusting in that circulation. So I really had to redefine that, especially coming into business and having a deep trust in myself, and coming back to this truth that what if I do get to create from a space of love and what I actually love to do? And what if that is the gateway to creating a really incredible experience with wealth? And what if I get to show other women that they can do that too? So that was a big piece for me, was redefining this, like working hard in something you don't like to just get enough, and shifting that into working intentionally with devotion, but also with ease and also with flow, from a space of like, this is what I love. And then I found that the more that I was in that love frequency of like, this fuels me and this gives me life force, the more that money was just a natural outcome of that. So that's like a big piece of what I support my clients in too. It's really redefining, how we are conditioned and shifting that, taking our power back over it.
Yeah. And what was that experience like? Like, I feel like, because I can relate to with what we do, and, following, we talk a lot about following your intuition, and very similar, following your soul's purpose. But I know from our experience, it almost feels like you're your own guinea pig a lot of the time, where you're like, okay, like, I'm going to trust and I'm going to try this out. Because intuitively, again, you go back to your soul's knowing, this is what you need to be doing. But it feels really scary because it goes against the stories we were raised on, as far as like, you have to work super hard doing something you don't like to earn money. But then at some point, whenever whenever that part of your story hits and you've evolved to this place where you're like, okay, I'm going to trust in myself that I have the answers within, and then I'm going to show up doing something that fills me with so much love and joy and that serves other people. But a lot of the times it may not make sense to other people on the outside looking in. So I'm curious, what was like your actual like first step to making money? Like, what were you doing to get paid, from that moment of being like, I want to quit my job and I want to start something new? Like, what was that new thing you started?
Yeah. So I literally went on to, I think it's called Upwork, and it's like a freelancing website. And I got a bunch of freelancing writing
We're
clients.
familiar.
And I was, yeah. And it's so funny. Like, even just last week, I was hiring someone on there, and I was like, wow, what a full circle moment that I used to be on this platform. And like, it's amazing. There's so many cool people on there. But yeah, I think I was like at my job. I remember being like, I'm at my job. Let's build some cash flow on the side and like a little bit of a nest egg before I quit. I didn't quit with much, like I think a couple of $1,000s in my bank account. I was like, let's just go for it. But yeah, I like, on a practical level, I literally just look at like, what is a skill that I have that I can start to monetize. And I think I was charging like $15 an hour or something for social media copy for some brands. Like it was nothing back then. So funny to think about. But I just started and I got a couple of different clients, and then I literally quit before I felt ready. And I think that's the key thing for me anyway. In when I look at my journey, it's like I've always made the move before I've really felt ready, because I've never really felt like fully ready for something. It's always just like, this is a desire and this is a soul knowing. And so I have to trust that. And of course, like I had to be really anchored in my truth and in my intuition, because everyone in my life was like, are you crazy? Because I had, on the outside, I had an incredible job, always going to events, traveling around the world for like, fashion shows and fun stuff. And but inside I was like, I feel really unfulfilled. So that was like the initial start of my journey, was just having to come back to my intuition, which is not always easy when we're around people that maybe we're used to hearing, advice from, like my parents or my husband. He was then partner at the time, boyfriend at the time. But I had to just keep coming back to myself. I think that's what's held me the whole time in my journey, has been that return back to my power.
Where does trust come in? Is that something with your
Yeah.
trust muscle? Have you always had a strong ability to trust? Or is that something, sounds like a lot of times you kind of just like threw yourself off the cliff. You're like, let's just see
Yeah.
what happens. So is that something that took time to get to that point where you could do that? Or is that always come naturally to you?
Yeah, no, that definitely was a muscle that I had to work, and I still do. Like I still have moments where it's like, oh, what do I actually want here? And I think that that's, yeah, it was never something that I just innately had in me, of like, I just trust myself. As a kid, I was like super shy, very intuitive, very like, I was like the observer in the family. I would always like watch everyone and like pick up on everything, but never really be like doing or saying anything because of so much fear. And I think like through that process of healing that part of me, I think I was really faced with like, where have I let other people lead me in life? And coming to almost like a pivotal moment of, I need to choose for myself. And I have that power, and I have had that power all along. And so I think that's where the trust muscle started. And then it's just a practice of continuing to use that. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's so true. And we have experienced so much of that ourselves. Working for yourself, you just have no choice but to trust sometimes. It's like,
Yeah.
what are your other options? You just have to do it and see what's going to be on the other side of all of it.
Well, it's kind of just like the next evolutionary step when you start doing the inner work and you start reflecting inwards and taking inventory of everything. It's just the natural progression where you start to hear your intuition so loudly, where you're like, I really can't ignore this now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, you speak about how your higher self can activate wealth on all levels, because I think that's kind of part of this holistic realm. Everything we're talking about, everything is so intertwined, and your intuition, I think personally, is connected to your higher self, and it's kind of the way you hear your higher self. So I'm curious how your higher self, can activate your wealth and what you're supposed to be doing in the world.
Yeah. I think for me, it's about a return back to my own knowing, um, without, as we were saying, like other people's influences or other people showing us the way and us following or listening. It's about really clearing like distortions and clearing outside opinions, which, I mean, we live in a world where it's like so chaotic at times with like everything and consistent messages and consuming of content and all of that. And so I think when we're tapping into that higher self, like to me, that's even our God self. It's really that part that we're so connected to source. Um, and for me, I know that that's the place where there is just the truth of who we are, that we are souls having a human experience, that we are limitless, that we are worthy, that we hold such love and power in who we are. And like, so that's the space that I feel when we're in that, then it's almost like the intuitive knowing and the voice, as you're saying, like is super clear. And I believe that that is our truth. And that's like that voice, when we hear it, or that intuitive knowing or feeling or sensing, because everyone kind of receives it differently. But when we receive it, to me, I know when I'm like, well, that's the thing that I need to do, because I know that there's no like outside influence. So then it flows into wealth, because then it's just naturally like, this is the roadmap, this is the step, this is where you go next. And I do talk about wealth on every level for a reason, because I think so often when we hear the word wealth, we think just money. And to me, it's an energy and it's a frequency, and it can flow into money, of course, but there's also like spiritual and energetic wealth. And I think that that is so powerful, because that's our currency in my mind. It's our energy is the currency that we give out. So I think, yeah, to kind of bring it back, it's really like being in that higher self connection. I don't know, it almost feels like I get like a silent feeling, in a way of like there's no noise, and there's just me and who I actually am, and my connection to that part of me. And then I know what the step is, or I know what the message is from there.
Do you have any advice on how people can start to connect with their higher selves?
Yeah, I think it's really about having a practice of getting outside of all the distractions and coming within you. Um, for me, that looks like literally closing down like digital stuff, everything digital away, um, doing a practice of like intentionally clearing other people's energy from my field. You know, I always say, you know, clearing all shared thought forms, shared emotions, like anyone else's energy, sending it back to them, and then calling back my energy. And that's a practice I do throughout the day, actually, like even like coming in and out of client calls and things like that, just as like energetic hygiene, you know, and making sure my energy field is as clean and clear as possible. But yeah, I would say like a really simple practice like that. And then just asking, like, you know, whatever you can do to get into your body, but then also get into those higher chakras that connect us as well. So for me, I love to go into the heart space, actually, and then I feel like that automatically connects me up to crown, and then, you know, above there as well. So I think it looks different for everyone, but I would recommend starting with that as a starting point.
I love that. I love that term, energetic hygiene. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's such a good, because it makes you think it's a daily practice, right? Because it
Yeah.
should be. If daily you're kind of looking at what's going on around you, what's affecting you, kind of clearing it out of the way. I really like that. One thing I'm just want to throw in here real quick, we're talking about kind of this more spiritual, soul level thing. And then we're talking about this idea of wealth. And I think a lot of people see those as being so separate. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
are spiritual, maybe you are, you're living very simply, you're more minimal, and then wealth can be seen as kind of this non-spiritual thing. So how do you connect the two?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. For me, we're here having a physical experience. So for me, I love the idea of, you know, if we're talking about, say, material wealth in the sense of, you know, buying something, having a car or clothing that you love, or, you know, I love jewelry. Jewelry is like my thing. I have so much gold jewelry, it's ridiculous, but I love the frequency that it gives me. So I think like for me, I like to connect it in that sense of when we're in the experience of having something maybe more material that we would think of wealth as, how does that thing in our life create a certain frequency, and maybe then also create a different identity that we see in ourselves, that then we can channel that into what matters, right? So for me, I know when in the morning I love putting on jewelry and like, you know, getting into something that I feel represents like me and my authentic energy and who I am, and like it makes me happy, and I know that I show up differently from that space. I know that I lead differently from that space. I know that I can be an example for my clients of where they can do, you know, choose their own choices around that too, and what that would look like. So I think I think it's really like coming out of that space of like the ego thinking, you know, we have this idea that like money or wealth and material things is from ego, but it doesn't have to be that. what we choose. It's what we choose it to be, right? And I think it's really, for me, it's about, I've chosen to have a physical experience. So why would I not want to like have an experience of like textures or like different, we're renovating our house right now. So like really beautiful cushions or whatever it might be. Because I know then from that space of experiencing it, then I'm also channeling that energy into my business and into the work that we do, like philanthropically. And like, there's so much more to it from there. So I hope that kind of answers it, but I think it's just giving it a different perspective from what we normally would think. Yeah.
And I also think it's a part of like everyone's individual soul blueprint, like whatever is authentically coming up for you. And if it's like, if you love gold jewelry, I make jewelry, so I also love gold jewelry.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look at your stuff up.
Yes.
Awesome.
And so like if that's a part of what lights you up, then by all means go for it. I'm curious if you can speak specifically to money when it comes to like tapping into your intuition and your higher self and what your soul is trying to tell you you are supposed to be doing in this world to make money. Because so I think that's just so often a lot of people may look at kind of the esoteric spiritual perspective towards money and be like, oh, you're so lucky you can look at it that way. But for me, I have to have a job. I have to make money. I have bills to pay. I have a car payment, whatever it may be. How can someone kind of start to move into that space of understanding that you can make money from your soul and from your higher self and from listening to your intuition, even if it doesn't make sense for them right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's really about connecting back. I think you said the word mission in there. That's the thing for me that, when I'm working with my clients and we're looking at what do you want to create financially, that's like the least interesting part. It's really like, what do you actually love? What do you care about? What do you know is just the next step? And bringing that into like a very intentional, non-egoic space where we're moving from love. It kind of sounds cringy to say that, but I mean love in like the purest form of truth and what is true for us and what excites us, what expands our soul. So for me, I know that money gets to just be a byproduct because I decide that and I choose that, and I've done a lot of work around choosing that and rewiring myself to like really anchor that as truth, that it's a byproduct of me saying yes to what I love. Because I know that when I'm like really invested in something and I really create almost like a mission beyond me, like that's the other piece. It's like, this is not about me. This is actually about the women that I'm here to serve. This is about their families. This is about their legacies. And then I get into like a ripple effect energy of the soul work. That's when it like, just even the money, as I said, is like the least interesting part. It's just like it's like the fun byproduct. And it gives us choice and opportunity and, different experiences and things like that. But it's like the actual wealth is then the legacy of the work. So I think for someone who's like, that maybe feels far off, it's just kind of firstly knowing like, does that feel true? Does that even feel like a possibility? And anchoring into that as your truth and coming back to that when you feel like you want to waver out of it, because we will. Like I have the wobbles all the time, but I'm like, where's the truth? Like, where is my truth? What do I know on a soul level? I actually feel like, yeah, this is possible and I've seen it. And I think another key thing is looking for expanders has always been something that's really helped me, like looking for people that are naturally just living that. And it's like, well, you absolutely have that within you too. So to bring it into even like a practical sense as well, I really love to work with my clients around like, how do we then bring that into like your brand and your mission and your message, right? And like sculpting your business from that, so that the love that you feel for the work is something that your community like tap into as well, and they are a part of it. Then it becomes more about like less about us and more about the collective and the legacy of what we're here to do.
Can you speak on, I love that all so much, by the way. So I'm thinking of this person who's decided to say yes. They know what they want. They found it. They're like, let's do it. There's kind of that in between. And sometimes it lasts longer than other times. But that in between of you're doing the thing, you're showing up the way you know you're supposed to, but you haven't seen anything come through yet. And you start to doubt it. Because you're like, okay, at what point? Because also you don't want to be unrealistic, because at a certain point, if it's not working, it's like, maybe I should give up, because maybe that's what I need to be doing. Maybe this was just temporary or whatever. So how do you kind of determine keep going and like this is just the in between and things will still come, or when it's like, all right, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, or what I'm supposed to be doing to make money. Maybe it is what I'm supposed to be doing, but it's not supposed to be
what's financially driving me. Yeah.
Right.
And rather than giving up, or like pivot, something like
pivot. I like the word better.
It's like you haven't failed, but you've like, I've put in enough effort towards this thing, but maybe it's time to like ask my soul, am I ready to pivot into something else?
Yes. That's exactly it, right? And this is so interesting because I find a lot of my clients come to me when they're in that space, when they're like, I kind of explain it as like 1 foot in the old world, 1 foot in the new world, and they can kind of feel like maybe they've had like the same kind of, you know, desires and goals for a while, and it's like, what is happening? Like, why is something not happening? So there's a couple of things. Like, one, it's, well, actually, do I desire this still? Like on a true level, not from like I'm just going to keep choosing it because it's what I've wanted for like 7 years or whatever it is. But do I actually desire it? And do I know for it to be true? And again, that's coming back to that practice we we're talking about of like getting outside of the noise and like coming within and building that muscle of trust with your higher self. So if it's a yes, then we embrace the journey of like, well, who am I becoming in this? Because for me, it's not like, for me, in my experience of like manifesting something that I've wanted, once the thing comes in, I'm like, okay, but it's actually about who I became to get here. Like, it's almost like it's fun and it's exciting, but it's like, but who did I actually turn into? Like, how did I hold a different standard for myself? How did I, you know, remove toxicity out of my life? How did I like step into my power, or whatever it might be? So that's the more fascinating part. So I find that gap can be really interesting because we do want to give up sometimes, and that's so normal. I've totally been there many times. But then it's about, well, if I do desire it, can I trust like there's something I'm becoming in this, and what is that? And what am I learning about myself? So there's that piece. And then there's also the pivot. And this is what I call divine rearrangement. And this is where a lot of my clients come in, where they're kind of like, maybe they've built their business in a certain way and they're known for a certain thing, and then they're just not feeling the energy, or like sales start to like kind of go slow and they're like, what is going on? And that's where we get into like, what is the next evolution of your soul work, and what do you actually want to be doing, and what do you actually desire? Like, if you just got rid of the old vision board and threw it away, like, what would you create from here and choose from here? And I find that that's the piece that almost requires more courage sometimes, because it's like, well, now I'm going to pivot and now I'm going to choose a new path. But I think ultimately it's about just constantly coming back to like, what's true, and what do I know is available for me? What do I actually desire? And whether that's choosing a different path or staying in the same, that's a choice that we make, and that only we can know as well within ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as you're saying this, I kind of would love for you to talk more on like, what do we do when we stay, when it gets hard? Because I also feel so much in, you know, in the spiritual community, it can be like, oh, if it's hard, or if you're struggling, or, you know, having an uncomfortable moment, or like you said, if you're wobbling a little bit, just it's time to move on to something else. But there's so many times when I've tapped into my intuition and into my soul, and it's like, no, you're good, keep going. That's a part of it. You know, I often use the metaphor of, I feel like I'm walking through the jungle on an unpaved, there is no path. I'm just walking through a jungle, and I have a machete and I'm hacking at all of the trees and leaves. And I'm like, no one has done this before me, and I'm just going, and it can feel really challenging at times. So I guess I would love for you to talk a little bit about that. Maybe give the people a pep talk. It's like, when you know your soul is on the right path, but you are just at a place of like, why has it not manifested yet?
Yeah. Well, I've been there, and again, many times. Like, I think this is the thing. It's like things appear at all different levels. It's like, it just, I always, we're constantly evolving, we're constantly journeying, right? um I think it's that, it's like, well, what if I just got in deeper? Like, what if I actually just really felt what's going on here? Because I find, like, when I'm in that space and I'm like, why is this thing not happening? It's like, okay, well, what is this reflecting? What can I learn? What can I get? What can I, like, reclaim in my life? Where am I still holding on to an old label that of how I've seen myself? Maybe something's, it's kind of like a death and rebirth, right? It's letting go of so much of the old self and then rediscovering, and that's not just like an overnight thing. And I think it's really to, like, if you know that it's true for you and you know that you're here to, like, forge this path and follow this thing, and this is what you desire, and you can feel the vision, and you can, it's like, I know it's going to happen. Can you trust in your timing? Can you trust in your own timeline? I think this is a huge thing that happened, that helped me, was not comparing. And that's so hard because we're, like, constantly, like, looking at what other people are doing, right? But it's knowing that I'm only on my own timeline and there is only my timeline. So wouldn't I celebrate it, and wouldn't I just, like, get into the depths and, like, dive in the ocean and be like, all right, let's go. Let's go straight in. I think that's where those practices of, like, connecting to our self and our intuition is going to hold us in the days where we're doing, like, a big emotional release. And, like, I've had moments where I'm, like, you know, crying sacred rage, just like cleansing such old heaviness in the journey of becoming who I am and who I've been underneath, right? So, like, there's such a level of I guess it's really like loving yourself forward through it, and no matter what's happening, but holding the truth of what you're stepping into. It's not easy,
Yeah,
but
it
it's
really is so
beautiful, right?
much. Yeah, so much self-love. When you said that just now, I was like, that's really what it is, because you get in
Yeah.
this game of comparison and judging yourself, and I didn't do it well enough. I haven't worked hard enough. You just start criticizing yourself, and it's like, whoa, whoa,
Mm.
whoa. Really, in those moments, it's like, again, you tap in, you realize that this is the path I'm supposed to be on. I need to trust my own divine timing. And what goes
Mm.
along with that is I need to love myself through it and be patient. And just like, it all comes back to loving yourself. Because whenever
Mhm.
I'm in one of those moments of just like criticism and judgment within myself, it's like, it only can go on for so long because I am the one who needs to shift out of it. So it's like, how
Yeah.
quickly can you shift back into
Yeah.
presence and, yeah, just being there for yourself?
Yeah,
100%.
can you speak on the importance of mindset with all of this? Because, like you were
Yeah.
saying, shifting out of when you kind of get in those moments of, self doubt or whatever, just being
Mm.
able to hold on to that mindset of, no, I'm going to do this. I got this.
Yeah, and I think it's really that. It's choosing, again, I feel like this theme today is really about, like, the highest truth and, like, coming back to what's true for us. Like, I feel like that even goes above mindset in a way, in the sense of, or more powerful than mindset, in the sense of, like, what is coming from our higher self? What do we know to be true about, even our soul's capacity? Like, that's something that I come back to, is if I'm feeling fear or moving through that divine rearrangement period where it's like, well, things feel uncomfortable. It's like, well, what do I know about the truth of my soul? And for me, it's always that my soul is limitless. My soul is inherently worthy. My soul is always expanding into more. Like, that's the nature of our soul. So that's what holds me. So I think the mindset then comes in from, like, well, if that's my highest truth, then how am I anchoring that in to my mind, but also my body, my energy field? Um, and again, like, the repetition of that. But I think it's less than just, thinking it, it's feeling it. It's feeling it. That's the key thing, is the emotion of, like, I am safe. I can trust myself. I'm on a timeline that is mine, and it's beautiful and it's perfect and everything's working out. And really, like, feeling it. That's the key thing, even more powerful than the mindset piece. I feel like the mindset's like the launch pad, and then it goes into, like, the feeling and the experience of it. Yeah.
The experience, and I always talk about the exposure therapy of like being in real life moments where that uncertainty comes up, and it's like in those moments you can sit with yourself in silence and hear your intuition and tap into your higher self, but it's like, can you do that when you're doubting yourself? Can you do that when you have something in front of you that you're comparing yourself to, or when someone else is doubting you? Can you still hold that mindset and that love for yourself and that connection to your soul's highest purpose? Because that's super powerful. That's like a superpower in itself, because the more we get caught up, or at least with myself, the more I get caught up in those wobbly moments, the longer it's going to take me. And that's what I've realized. It's like, if I can just, Danielle and I has it been 24 hours yet? I don't know. We did this.
Have we succeeded?
I don't know. I can't remember, but we've done this challenge the past 24 hours where I saw it on Instagram and I was like, that looks like fun. But it was like, just try it out and try not to complain for 24 hours. And I was like, I can do 24 hours. I can do that. But it's like something like that, where like you catch yourself and you're like, wait a second, let's bring it back to love. Let's bring it back to like, everything's working out. I'm doing okay, but I just feel like with the other things in life, like we were talking about, whether it's judging yourself or comparing, to always bring it back. But it's hardest to do that in the moments when you're like actively being triggered by something. Yeah.
100%. That's
Can you speak about,
yeah.
Oh, go for it. What were you gonna say? That's when what?
Oh yeah, no, that's just when you're in full power, when you can actually facilitate it in the moment.
Can you speak about comparison? Just because I feel like that's such a thing that everyone deals with all the time. And we've also been talking about your own, soul's divine timing and trusting that like things will happen exactly when they're supposed to for you. But so often, especially as we get older, we're entering our 30s, and it's like we've chosen a path that is just completely soul led, but there's other people in our lives who are just on completely different trajectories. So I know for ourselves, sometimes we're sitting here like, so what are we doing? What have we decided to do with our lives? Because everyone
kind of crazy.
Everyone else is doing other stuff that looks really cool. But I'm just gonna hang out here and keep trusting. Because the second I start to question myself, or like, ask myself like, should I be doing something else? The answer is always no. So it's more like, how can I deal with those moments of comparing myself to other people?
Yeah. Well, I really struggled with comparison a lot, like especially growing up, but also like early 20s was like huge comparisonitis, I call it. It's just like caught the comparisonitis, but like that was how I lived my life, was looking at what other people were doing. And then like replicating that and trying to figure it out and not being authentic. So I think then I started to go through a period of like, well, let's just not look, like blinders on. And I feel like that's how I built the initial stage of my business, was as much as possible trying to just be very inward and really just create and not look, although that didn't always happen, of course, but as much as possible protecting my space. Then I went through like, in recent years, a different perception of comparison actually being something that I can use for good. And so I was like noticing, okay, if I'm feeling, I'm comparing myself to this person, or I'm feeling even like jealousy, right? Or any of the like envy, anything coming through, it's like, okay, well, this is like part of the human experience. Like, what can I learn from feeling this? And then I was like, well, what am I seeing in that person that I'm actually desiring? Or what am I seeing in them that maybe is within me in my own way? And so I started to like play with it. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is like bringing it from like a heaviness around comparison to like playfulness and excitement and possibility, and like expand, like having these people show me what's possible from an expansion point. So it's like, okay, well, they've created that. Awesome. What if I did that, but in my own way, and doing this and like just seeing it as a fun exercise, really. Like, I think when we bring play and like lightheartedness and possibility to things like that, it just shifts the way that we view it. And then we can use it to channel it into what matters to us. So that's been my journey of comparison.
Yeah. When you're in those moments of comparison, like what has been your process of getting out of it? Sometimes I feel like I love that, like, use them as expanders, and like, if it's possible for them, it's possible for me. But what if it feels so far off, like, and you find yourself in kind of like a dark place where you're like, what is going on? How would you talk someone out of getting out of like a, I don't know, more dense space around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's about, well, what in this example, or what am I comparing myself to that I actually want? Like what feels true for me? Um, and writing that down and getting really clear on like what pieces you do desire to experience yourself. But then I would have them do like a really deep celebration of who they are right now and what everything that has brought them to this point. Like I think when we look at our journey to the now, even if we don't feel like we're in a space where we really want to be, or we're like, I'm kind of in a point in my life where I'm like, not everything has really happened yet, or I'm like in this weird stage, but what has brought me here and what have I gone through and what have I overcome? And I think that just brings us out of even looking at someone else, and it's like back to our own power and back to our own story. And I think I find like when I do this with my clients, it actually highlights really powerful experiences that they've gone through, that they take that, and maybe it's a painful experience, but they take that and they use it as purpose, and it gives them this like fuel and this like focus, because like, yeah, look at where I am and look at what I've come through and what is possible from here. It's like shifting. Yeah, I love this like kind of alchemy of like shifting our pain or our comparison, or those lower frequencies, into purpose and into mission. So that would be,
Yeah, and just bringing it back to yourself as well, because like you said, it's so easy to be looking outside of yourself and just bringing it back to what is going on in my life, what have I gone through, what am I going to do in the future. I think that's a really great way to just stop looking at that other person. If you're really having a hard time with what they're doing, just like bring it back to yourself.
And self-love, like, again, I feel like that's a huge, at least for what I'm taking away from this conversation, is like, man, in those moments, it really is just a lack of trust in yourself and loving yourself through those moments. Because as you were saying, in those challenging times when you say, okay, what have I gone through to get myself here? Like, I've gone through a lot too. Why am I putting the magnifying glass on someone else's life and deeming it as more valuable than my own? Like, you are just as valuable in your own ways and have gone through just as amazing things. And also, turning your pain into purpose kind of thing. Like, I feel like at this point, if I ever have like a moment of doubt or feeling lesser than, or just a wobbly moment, it's almost comical, because I can't even like really sink into victimhood as much, because I'm like, gosh dang it. Like, I know that something great is on the other side of this. And by me wallowing in it for too long, it's just like, I can't even do it, because I've done so many rounds of practice. It's that exposure therapy of like, I've gone through this so many times now that I know I just might.
It's not going to be helpful. You already know that. It's like, if I stay in this state, nothing is going to happen. So let's get out of it.
And my nervous system like won't even do it. I'm like, like, let me just be so sad. And it's like, nope, let's go do something else.
Yeah, I'm the same though. I think you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, I've done so much healing around this thing, right? Or like, this has been something that's a recurring thing. And then you start to, I think the energy like lightens, or like, I don't know. I've still yet to kind of explain it in a good way, but it's kind of like the heaviness of it doesn't really have control anymore, I think, because you are like, okay, I've been here and I know that this isn't the truth of who I am. And I know that when I'm coming from a space of love, I can feel this and I can allow myself to move through it. But it's maybe like you process it quicker. Like for me, it's like my processing now is like so much quicker than what it was like even a few years ago. And everyone's on their own journey with that too, like their own healing experience too, and understanding of that. But I can resonate so much.
Yeah, or something will go wrong and I'll just like have to laugh, because it's just funny. It's like not what I wanted to happen at all. Like, it's like falling apart and I'm just like, well, that's kind of funny. I wonder like what that means, like you just like notice it and you're like, well, must be making space for something new.
Yeah. Are you gonna laugh or are you gonna cry? Like, honestly, it really is that simple. You're like, are you gonna be okay? Yeah. All right, well, let's just keep on moving then.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep it moving.
I'm curious. Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, really working on your mindset around money and feeling worthy of money when you were younger. Do you have any advice, or I don't know, how would you guide someone through that process of maybe not feeling as or even if it's like subconscious, I feel like so much of this can be a subconscious thing where you may think I'm worthy of money, but then you're like confused on why it's not coming into your life.
Mm.
And you start to realize like, oh, maybe it is because I have these feelings somewhere that I'm not worthy.
Mm. I think the biggest turning point for me was realizing that my worth isn't connected to money. Like my worth just is. It just is inherent in all of us. That was huge because I used to be like, well, I mustn't be worthy because I'm not making what I want, right? And I think so many people think that, and we have this conditioning around that. It's really damaging because we are inherently worthy and we are inherently valuable. And that was the piece, and that's what I recommend everyone looking at is like, where is money amplifying that I'm not seeing that in myself? Because to me, like when I think about money, it simply is, it's just a neutral energy, and then it is amplified by what we imprint on it, and like the emotions we put on it, and the beliefs and the energies, and everything is amplified through money. And so I always look at money as a really powerful like reflection of like, okay, well, if I look back in myself, where am I not actually coming from the truth that I'm inherently worthy? Like, where am I still thinking that I'm not, or that I'm not good enough, that I'm not smart enough? Or that was my thing. Like, I'm not smart enough because I didn't go and get like the normal university degree. I went into like creative arts and then went into like fashion and e-commerce and, just always worked in creative fields. But I think it's really about looking at, firstly, like separating that, right? Like money is not connected to your worth. You are inherently that. There is no question on that. That is not up for question that you're worthy. And that was my journey was, well, okay, but I still don't believe that, right? So then it was like, okay, well, how can I believe that? And where have I been told that I'm not worthy? Where have I, what conditions did I grow up in where I thought that I wasn't good enough or smart enough or cool enough or whatever the thing is. So that's the journey. That's a piece of it. But I think it's really important to, like I was saying, like money can amplify like how we see ourselves. And so I think this conversation, coming back to the love piece and the authenticity piece, like I really believe that when we're authentically who we are, we're amplifying that through money as a currency. Like it's, we see so many people in the world who have a whole lot of money and they're coming from a lot of ego and control and all of that. And money is amplifying that, right? But then there's also amazing people who are leading with like integrity and authenticity, like both of you, and like love and intention, and money gets to amplify that too. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is just like my worth is not tied to it. And so then what would I imprint on money? Like how would I treat money? How would I respect money? How would I speak to money? Because ultimately what I've found is the way that I treat money, respect money, talk to money is how I'm treating and respecting and talking to myself. And then with my connection to God. So I kind of like always bring it back to like me and God and the divine, and money gets to kind of just be amplified through that.
Something else that you mentioned early in the conversation was circulation of money, of not being afraid to let go of it. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is energy, just like everything's energy, as we know, right? And I found that the more, so say we have the intuitive knowing to circulate money into something, maybe it's a purchase, an investment, something to, improve your business, your life, your health, whatever it might be. When we deeply desire it, and it's almost like an instant yes, right? When we're like, oh, this is the thing that I want to do, but then the money fear comes in. I found that when we do that, we're like in that contraction energy, and we're in control, like we're trying to control, when money is a natural flowing energy. And actually, I found it to be so healing to practice circulating money into something that comes from desire or something that I love. I practiced this circulation of like donating when I didn't really have that much money. And that changed so much for me, because even if it was like tiny amounts, like a couple of dollars, or like walking past someone homeless and being like, here's my $5 note. I just started to make that like a very, very consistent thing, because I knew that if I am circulating it out, it's like there's a natural circulation happening. So I know that firstly I'm giving, and that's always going to be like coming back to truth, that it's safe to give, that it's safe to share, but also there's a receivership that naturally just happens through that as well. Because we're out of this like control or like scarcity of like holding on. I always say like money wants to move, and like we want to move. So it's kind of like if we desire more money flow, I always ask my clients, like, where are you not flowing? Like, what are you not doing that you know you desire to do? And even if it's like sharing a message on social media that you're like, oh, can I share that? It's like, share it, share the thing, let the energy circulate. So it applies to more than money, of course. It's like, how can we circulate our energy into what matters and what we care about? And I find that it then impacts our money flow as well.
Wow. It's really just like clicking for me right now as far as trusting. It's almost just, it's a completely new way of being that we were not raised, at least us or the people around in my community. It's like, you're not raised to think like that. And so it just is a whole new reprogramming as far as like the self-love aspect, the trust aspect, the circulating money aspect, walking through life, trusting that the universe, earth, God has your back, that by creating and moving and circulating not only your body, but your finances and your thoughts, and just like not staying stagnant, you are going to live a fuller, more beautiful life that will just continue to evolve and just like blow you away. And I know with myself, again, it's just like a constant learning this through experience and through kind of like, okay, I'm going to take the next leap. Okay, I'm going to do the next thing. Like when you were talking about this, and we're going to Hawaii for my 30th birthday in January, and it's quite the like personal investment, and just in my and it's like I'm just going to have the experience, and to, you know, like I only turned 30 once, and this is what my soul feels called to do. But it definitely feels a little like wobbly at times, like, oh, I'm going to be spending how much money in January, right after the holidays, right after the, you know, Christmas season. But trusting and knowing, it's like, okay, this is really coming up for me, and I just know, it's knowing I have to go do it. But spending that money is kind of like it's definitely like a stretch to be like, okay, let's spend, you know, X amount of dollars to go to a tropical island for a week. But I know that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
You're supposed to be circulating it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Hawaii is so magical as well. My goodness, I'm jealous. I want to go.
You can come.
Yeah, I'm just gonna like be like, hey, I'm here for the birthday. I love that. I think again, the key thing is like the knowing, like knowing this is just what I meant to do. And that's truly how I've lived my life, only, you know, in recent years, really, like in the last decade. Like most of my life, I was like, well, this is what I should do because this is what everyone else does, you know, or this is what my parents said, or whatever it might be. And I think there's such a power in reclaiming that. And as we're saying, like the circulation of not just money, but our energy and into what matters and into what we're moved by. Like that, you can't go wrong. Like there's literally, I really believe that our desires and what leads us are the safest path to take. So.
Well, lastly, I just really would love to touch on the subject of motherhood in business, because I know this is like a newer role that you've stepped into, and, you know, within society and the world we live in, I think it's kind of a new place for people to navigate. And for myself, I'm super curious how that's going to look in, you know, the years to come within my own life, as far as like, okay, how am I going to manage a business and be a mom?
Yeah. I mean, there's lots I could talk about, but to bring it back to what I've learned, because my daughter's 4, she just turned 4, and my son is 5 months. So I've got like a sassy, fiery 4-year-old, and then I've got this like sweet little angelic boy who's just so peaceful. He's so peaceful. And my daughter's just like the life of the household. She's so funny. And so I think the biggest thing that firstly, what I intentionally went into when I had my daughter and when I was pregnant was that this baby will bring abundance, and really trusting that babies bring that. Like they are such teachers, and it has made me such an intentional mother, such an intentional business owner too. And I think that's the key thing. It's like, okay, yes, I have way less time because I've got children and they're with me most of the time. And so then what hours do I have and what actually matters? And this, I really believe that my children was such a catalyst for me growing my business in the last years to where it has been, to where it's come to, because I had to get fierce and devoted to what mattered and what I actually wanted. Because I found before that, I was kind of like, oh, I could do this. And I was like, like my energy was a little bit scattered, to be honest. And then knowing, okay, well, if I have even an hour a day to show up, like, what am I doing? What am I sharing? What am I creating? What am I offering? And so it made me very intentional, and it really made me like have to look at where am I not leading myself? Where am I not mothering myself? Because I really believe like a mother is born as well. And so there's this whole initiation you go through, and I'm going through it again now, 5 months postpartum with being a mom of 2 now. So it's kind of like, okay, how does this now blend? So I think the biggest thing that I can impart is that your babies can bring abundance. Children can bring that if you choose that and if you lead with that energy. And then it's about like, how can I get so intentional with what I actually want to be doing so that there is only that and I'm just focused, because that creates like a very strong point of attraction. And I think that it's beautiful to witness like the world that we live in now, especially with like our online service providers and different businesses that we can run online. Like you really can create a lifestyle around having children. And I have many mama clients that like, they'll have their kids while they're on our mentoring calls, and it's like, bring the kids, like, let's just do it all together. Like it's like, we're in that like village energy because it is different and we are carving a new way, and we're totally rewriting the rules of what it's looked like in the past and choosing our own rules. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And as
Yeah.
you were saying that, I was like, plus the energy of being a mother, at least from observing all the mothers in my life or that I've talked to and experienced, it's like that energy is so fierce and like so determined and so nurturing and protective and like straightforward. You're not beating around a bush. You're like, this is what's, like, this is it. You're so clear on everything. Yeah. So it's like, apply that to business. Whew, I could see how that really could catapult you actually onto another level rather than kind of just being like, well, I have all this time and like, I'll get to it when I get to it. It's like, you just are so much more clear with your intention and your time and all of that. So I could really see how that could benefit it actually in the long run.
Yeah, that fierce intention for sure. Yeah.
Plus babies. Oh my gosh, that they bring abundance. I'm like, I love that so much. It's so sweet to think about.
Don't tell her that she'll have one tomorrow.
I'm like, Danielle, I'm just going to have my kids like while we're recording episodes, if that's okay. Oh my gosh.
All right. So thank you so much for being with us today. This has been such an amazing conversation. One last kind of big question, so we don't have to go too deep into it, but what do you feel your purpose is in this life?
Oh, yeah, that is deep. I love it. Well, I've asked myself this question many times. I think it is to remind people of their power. I really feel like my work is to bring people back into their own power, into their soul's power, and then channel that into good and into what matters. So that's it. Simple.
I can feel that.
Amazing.
Totally.
Yeah.
In this conversation, it is simple, because I feel like so often we overcomplicate these topics and these, conversation points like we touched on today. And every single time it's like, come back to yourself, love yourself through it. Like, tap into your higher, like, reminding myself of my own power in these moments. I'm like, okay, no, girl, you got this. You're not giving yourself enough credit. Like, you're doing the damn thing. Keep going.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, for anyone who wants to work with you or follow your journey, how can they do so?
Yeah. So my website's jennablack.co. So they can come and find all my programs and offers on there. But I'm always on Instagram. That's pretty much my main hub. So jennablack.co on Instagram as well. And whenever I do a podcast interview, I always would love if anyone listens to it, like message me. I'm not someone that's just like never in my DMs. I'm always in there chatting. And I actually love really hearing from people. So yeah, if you listen to the episode, I'd love to chat and hear what experience you had or aha moments you had. So yeah, Instagram, jennablack.co, and then jennablack.co website.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for listening to this week's episode.
Talk to you next time.